In this situation, it's the only time we use the product. So we need to be kind and considerate and help that person.
There are insides that we are very knowledgeable about, and we need to find the best way to express that information to our clients.
All right. Welcome to the Ridiculously Amazing Insurance Agent Podcast, everybody. We appreciate you coming in here today and spending a little time with us as we dive deep into the world of claims. I am joined here with my co-host today, the wonderful Miss Therese Potter, who has taken claims, had claims, and probably, but not been a claims adjuster, because I always have a little like soft spot in my heart for claims adjusters. Like, that's a level of torture I don't know if I could totally get into. But people do it and they love it. And so I do think it's the thing that we're going to be very focused on today is it's the only time people use your product. When we talk about the world's greatest claims process, understand that we're going to take a stance from the idea of how we use it, how we can impact people's lives, how clients look at the process. So, one of the first things I would like to bring up, Therese, and want to get your feedback on it is, okay, so I'm Joe Schmo, teacher, nurse, whatever, and I have an auto accident. Like, I probably haven't had one in years, right? And I'm not used to the process or the workflow, but I'm probably a little shaken up, a little uncomfortable. Maybe it's my fault, maybe it's not, but I have this inconvenience now of I can't drive my car, it's got to get repaired, all of these other things. And in an insurance agency, Therese, right? Like, we take 5 of those a day.
Yep.
So how do you think, when looking at like the right process, how do you recommend agents think about putting that customer really at the center of the process? Because I think a lot of agencies do what's maybe easiest for them and not really think about this teacher or nurse or whatnot that's having a really rough day.
So I think the best way to think about this is if you were to get into an accident as the insurance agent, you know all this stuff. But imagine, and you're going to be flustered because it happened to me a couple of years ago where I got into an accident and it was like, oh my goodness, thank God I'm an insurance agent because I knew exactly what to do. So when you have a customer call you who's been in a claim, the first and foremost thing you need to do is ask them if they're okay. And ask them if their family is okay, because that is the most important part. So first, foremost, ask them if they're okay. And, you kind of might want to role play that one because sometimes if somebody says they're not okay, you have to know how to respond to that. And it's very difficult to respond to that, especially if they're emotional.
Sure.
So if you answer the phone, you say, hey, are you okay? And they start crying, you have to know how to basically handle that. And you're going to have to give them some time to, gather their thoughts and get themselves together because they're not going to be able to answer you right away. So first and foremost, you want to make sure they're okay. And then it depends on your state. What state are you in and how does your state handle it? Because in North Carolina, where I am, you file the claim against the person who's at fault. Now, the issue with that is your customer will probably always tell you it wasn't my fault. They're probably always going to say it's not their fault.
It was a raw deal, Therese.
Yes.
So I wasn't texting and driving. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes. So there's a very fine line there that you have to also be able to discover because you can't tell them it was their fault. I got a lot of calls where they turned left on a blinking yellow arrow and, the oncoming car hit that. Yeah. So, and they think they were in the right of way. So, you need to say, do you know whose fault it was? Did the officer tell you whose fault? Have you called the police? So Are you okay? Have you called the police? If they say, no, we don't want to call the police, I would recommend they call the police. So there is a record of the accident because unfortunately in today's day and age, there are people being don't call the police. I had the one that hit me. She ran a stop sign going 45 miles an hour. Had no idea the stop sign was even there.
Whoopsie doodle.
And almost T-boned me, but she just got the back rim of my tire. So she made me do a circle. And she kind of left the scene, but then came back, thank God. And I had worked a checkpoint with the police department the night before. And one of the officers that showed up was one of the guys I worked with the night before, so it was perfect. Like, so I knew his name. I knew his name and everything. But she did come up to me and say, "Hey, my husband said we just want to pay you. We just want to pay you."
I've
And I
had
was
that
like,
happen once before, and I was like, no.
yeah, no, you want the police to be there, and you never, ever, ever want to accept payment from them because they think that closes the claim and they're done with it. My car needed 5 bumpers.
Oh, wow. I
My
didn't know cars
car,
had 5 bumpers. This is news.
they could not. My car's the limited, so it's got the silver bumper instead of the black bumper. So they had to paint it, and they kept getting the paint wrong. And I'm sorry, but I'm an insurance agent. I'm going to make sure you put me exactly back the way I was before my accident.
I know my rights.
Yes, yes. And so I ended up having to go to 2 different car repair shops. It also ended up having to go to Toyota to prove that one of the issues that it had to do with the accident. So this was a year and a half process that I went through. So ask if they're okay, make sure they've called the police, and then you have to say, okay, did you talk to the officer? Did the officer say whose fault it was? In the state of North Carolina, like I said, we would call against the person who's at fault. I think it's in New York that you always file it on your own insurance. So it depends on the state. So you would then, walk them through that and try to warm transfer them to the claims phone number for the carrier that they are with. And the warm transfer, the reason for that would be just to kind of let the person on the other end know, this is what I've got from them. They're not injured. They've called the police. They were at fault. They were not at fault. So they don't have to repeat that, because repeating all of that all over again is going to be frustrating for them.
I also think the warm transfer is nice to make sure they get to somebody, right? So sometimes these claim centers might have a little backlog, little wait, or they get put to the right person. Like when I think everyone has to remember, like in a claim situation, whether it's your home, your vehicle, your business, whatever it is, people might be a little bit frazzled. And so just knowing that they're not going to call and like, have you ever gotten, a big company and it's like, okay, for this, press here, for this, press here. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I wasn't paying attention because I was looking at my car that's leaking fluid and I missed the number prompt. Like, I think it's just the right thing to do to ease that person in. And some agencies get very pushed back a lot, even on just transferring the call. So you have to know your carriers. Every carrier might give you different instructions. You have to do that. Okay. So I know that there's some very big carriers out there that want you to take the claim by all means. So this is when you have a little bit more fluidity of your choices. But I always like to remind people that, in this situation, it's the only time we use the product. So we need to be kind and considerate and help that person. And also, too, some claims come in that shouldn't be put in. Yep. Or just, I know you cannot advise the person what to do. You cannot stop them from putting a claim in. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. But hey, it's $600 and your deductible's $500. You're going to get $100 in a claim on your record. A lot of people need to think that
even if the carrier doesn't cover it. So we had a couple who did not insure their motorcycle. Their motorcycle was left outside. It was stolen. We let them know that they should not file a claim on their homeowner's policy because it would not cover it. They called and filed the claim anyway. And that put a third occurrence on their homeowner's policy. So when it came up for renewal, the carrier was like, we're not renewing them. They have 3 occurrences.
Yeah, which is scary, right?
Yeah. And so we are knowledgeable and we know when they should file a claim and when they shouldn't. Number one, if they're close to the deductible, it's pointless to file a claim because it goes on their record and they're not going to get anything anyway.
Yeah.
And if it's a claim that's just not covered, and you have to explain that that vehicle needed to be insured and you didn't insure it, and they insisted on calling anyway. So, there are insides that we are very knowledgeable about, and we need to find the best way to express that information to our clients and make them know, we are the experts at this. We know what we're doing. We've dealt with this before. And this is what our advice is. Now, they don't always take it. And we have to accept that too.
And I think that, they don't always take it. I just always remind people that we can bring the horse to water, but can't make them drink. So we still did our part. And, they're going to have to learn the hard lesson of what it looks like when you have claims on your record.
Yes.
But having people warm transfer and being there for the person does mean a lot to somebody who just had a very traumatic event. And I think, auto accidents, depending on the severity, and like a young child, like a child, a youthful driver, I should say. Hopefully we don't have any like 10-year-olds driving, but we might somewhere. Like that's very impactful for the family, right? Like they're nervous, they're scared. Or if you've ever had a bad homeowner's claim and you can't live in your home, I mean, it is a very traumatic experience. Like that happened to me. We lived in a hotel for 9 months. I never want to do that again, ever. And everyone out there's laughing like, doesn't she live in a hotel 9 months out of the year? Well, it's very different when it's you go on the road and then you come back to a hotel. Okay. And it's not exactly the Ritz-Carlton, guys. It's not usually an extended stay where you burn toast and the freaking fire alarms go off. I could tell you many stories from that time frame. How many times my dog escaped and started feeling like she was going to go run. She ran through the hotel room. The hotel, we were so worried she's going to like sneak out. But having somebody there that updates them, and that can lead to the next part of like a good process, which is there's some claims that are easy, like a glass claim, maybe a fender bender, something that gets cleared up and cleaned up. And then there's ones that go on for a very long time. And I think sometimes when we don't warm transfer or that client calls the carrier direct, we may be none the wiser that this is going on. And so you have to have a process to go check your claims, evoke claims download. But we want to get to a place where, hey, you want to call that person, because I cannot tell you, like when we first moved into the hotel, it was like, oh, well, you'll probably be here like 2 to 3 weeks. It was 9 months for a variety of different reasons. It was complicated. It was a condo. And the unit on the top floor was foreclosed on, and a third-party contractor came in to winterize it, got cold, they never winterized it correctly, so pipes burst. That caused flooding down the second floor where that guy was on a business trip, so his unit was destroyed. That came leaking down into ours on the first floor. So like there's all this finger throwing of like, who's going to cover it? There's no unit owner because it's the bank. Well, the bank is the unit owner. There's a third party, like fly by night seat of his pants, contractor that they hire to come winterize. That guy's got like no coverage, and then there's all of us. And so, just checking in and being like, this is where we're at. This is the next step. This is what your options are is so, so critical, I think. And they may not like the claim, but they can like you, is what I always tell people. And I think that that's a very critical component, is separating you from the outcome of the claim. Like you're their advocate. And it might be covered, it might not be covered. And I do encourage you to have the carrier tell them if it's covered or not covered. I don't think that you need to get involved in that. But you should be reading the policy language too and making sure that that is legitimate and advocating where you can, or at least educating people on what the next steps are.
And you can look at it when they call in, look and see if they have a rental car, and you can look and be prepared. If they start asking questions, I always liked to look at it and be prepared if they did start asking questions.
Yeah.
I would try not to answer it and say, let that go to claims. Let's talk to the claims person. Let the claims person handle it. Don't tell them they don't have the coverage, but be prepared. So when the claims person does tell them that and they call you back, you're ready for it already.
Sure.
And in one of the agencies I worked at, we had our receptionist every day would pull all the claims for that day and just make the courtesy phone call. Hey, we saw that you had a claim. We wanted to first and foremost make sure you were okay. Then we wanted to check and make sure you didn't have any questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really important to document.
Yes, please document everything that you can.
Yes, it's very important because they could say they told you something, they told you, the agent, something they didn't. When they talk to the claims people, they could even say to the claims people, well, I just talked to my agent. My agent said that was covered. So be very, very clear in your documentation that you spoke to a customer. I mean, I've even been on cases where the vehicles were not covered, that the clients never put the vehicle on the policy. The dealership, they expected the dealership to call. The dealership never called and added it. I had 3 or 4 cases of that in 1 year. It was crazy. Oh. And one of them, the car was totaled and they had no coverage, and they, damaged another car and they had to pay all of that out of pocket. And you have to be careful of what you say to the customer because they will quote you. And if your phone calls are recorded, that can fall back on the agency as an errors and admissions. Yep. You have to be very, very careful when it comes to claims, what you say to the customer and what you say to a claims adjuster, because sometimes the claims adjusters will call in to talk to you And if it's something serious, you might want to pass it up to management and then have them talk to the claims adjuster. But just be very careful. Make sure you're documenting every single communication, everything you said, what the customer said to you. That's all very, very important.
100%. So I think the big keys are for you guys to think about claims in your process. And, we have some agencies that have a dedicated claim specialist. You do need to be a certain size to support that. And I know everyone's like, well, hopefully we don't have that many claims. I agree, but they're going to, sometimes they happen. And in commercial lines, it's actually very helpful to clean up those claims, before things get a little crazy at renewal. So there's a lot of power to having somebody that's very patient and can talk through the claims. And I will say this, all the claims people that with in agencies that we have, they love it that the staff is doing renewal review calls, because when they have to tell the person there's no rental car reimbursement, like, I know I rejected it last time I talked to Sally.
Yeah.
And, and it just makes the whole claims process that much more human. And if you're not doing those renewal calls, people assume that they have all this stuff, right? Like, they just assume, and then they get pissed.
That word full coverage that they always tend to use, and what full coverage means to them and what full coverage means to you is totally different. So don't ever use that word, because they'll assume that they have it.
Agreed. So just understand too, as we're thinking about claims, like how you say it, what you say, scripting it out, letting everybody have the same process. The one thing I leave everybody with on this podcast is, without a written claims process, okay, everybody could be doing something differently. So say Teresa and I work together in agency, and we were used to giving them the claims number, right? And that's what I knew. That's what I was used to. It's not right or wrong. That's just my background. And Teresa was used to taking the claim and then calling it in. What happens is it's an inconsistent approach. So one, Teresa might be backlogged on her work because she's getting all these claims and doing these big, long claim intakes, and I might be speeding through, but clients are not satisfied. So on one hand, I'm looking efficient, but my client's not satisfied. On the other hand, Teresa's looking backlogged, but her clients are happy. And you see why this is so critical. We have processes. And this is why we're launching our claims process pack. So it even has a survey. So if you want to know how your clients feel, I think that's great to give to carriers. It's got email templates for follow-up. It's got our recommended process for when to follow up, how to follow up, scripts on what to say. So really think through the idea that claims are a very, very pivotal point. And I think it's only enhanced when you have the right process. And the right process is the one that your agency comes up with that everybody follows. So, Teresa, have you ever worked anywhere that had like an actual written claims process?
No.
See, this is why we need them.
I tried to make them and implement them, but that really didn't work very well. But yeah, I mean, I've made some, but not that everybody would follow directly. No.
Which is a bummer.
I found out that if you file the claim with some carriers, they list you as the claim filer, and then your name goes as the agent. Your name goes on this thing of filing claims, and it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense.
Oh my goodness.
So you have to check with your carriers on that too.
So that is our take on it. Next podcast, we're going to talk about how to wow your customer during the claims process and how to make them feel very good, genuine, etc. But just a final plug too, since it is December, if you have not started your strategic planning for next year, check out our agency planner. It's a whole workbook designed to help you walk through step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of how to build a really kick-butt plan for next year. And in it, we actually have a process review section of if you don't have processes, that might become part of your plan for next year. And remember, APP has those resources for sale on our website. If you do, it's also a good time of year just to double check it. Like, you have to inspect what you expect. So sometimes it's good to pull that process out and confirm it's going, or identify areas you might want to modify up or change, because maybe you have claims download now or just different tools that will help you along the way. So check it out, all on our website. We love you guys. Hope you have a great December, happy holidays and everything else. But do not delay on your planning and your processes. Your team will appreciate it in the long run. So that is it. We will sign off and see you in the next podcast. Bye, everybody.